Hey everyone, this is Greg Washington, and welcome to the next episode of Guards Down. I have with me a very special guest. I got introduced to him, and the brother's out here doing some phenomenal things. His name is Mario Reyes. Mario, how's it going?
Doing good. How about yourself, sir?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Let's get into it. Tell us about yourself.
Name is Mario Reyes, originally from the Bronx, New York, Co-op City to be exact. Enlisted in the Air Force in 1999 as an escape route out of the perils of New York type. You know how that shit go. Am I allowed to curse?
Yes. we keeping it real. So
All right, well, fuck it then. I'm joking. So yeah, I enlisted to get away, just get an education. Obviously, nobody saw 9/11 happening. So that happened on my watch, and I was in Deployable Ground Systems 1. So I was in intelligence field my entire time in the Air Force doing tech support. So I was privy to see a lot of intelligence, whether it be SIGINT, human, common, all the different levels of intelligence. But a lot of feeds and graphic imagery came through the flights that I managed. Spent some time in Korea, did intelligence out there. I was the only person on that peninsula with my career field, so that was my way to wiggle out of all the drills. You know what I mean? I had to be on call 24/7, so there was a lot of drunk pages in the middle of the night in 2002, 2003 to have, and I was amazing when I was drunk. I fix anything. And I ended at NSA. And the irony about me ending at NSA is that I forgot the young man's name that was the whistleblower that showed the level of intrusion that the U.S. government was putting on the citizens.
Yeah.
He and I actually crossed paths because we had the same career field. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And since I got out the Air Force, I stayed in, just working with military, worked for the Navy for a while doing intelligence and tracking there. And now I went to Department of Transportation. Now I'm at Medicaid Services doing cloud support for them. But I live in Atlanta now, and I'm more known for being a poet out here.
got you. Okay. Well, man, I appreciate you bringing us up to, the current state. And I definitely want to thank you for your service as well.
Not for sure.
Good to, to be able to talk with other fellow vets and war stories.
One of the best things was I was, because of my career field, I got to deploy a lot. So I would often go to like joint commands or other bases that weren't Air Force. And I remember one time when I was in Camp Lejeune with my Marine brothers, and they had my tall, I'm 6'5", so they had my tall, skinny ass in the blues uniform, which was obviously calling all types of attention. So I remember one of my dudes, he ran up on me, he was like, "Oh, you slumming it with us?" I was like, "Nigga, I'm from the Bronx, B. Like, everything's an upgrade." You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, and that's awesome. So, of course, the podcast, the show is about raising awareness for PTSD and complicated grief. And I've been looking at how different cultures view, treat, and overcome trauma and grief. And so, the question that I always like to lead in and ask people, and it's kind of a tough one, is, did your parents or someone around you teach you how to deal with grief and trauma growing up?
Well, no, hell no. I'm Puerto Rican, and like most Caribbean culture, you're just taught men don't cry, men don't grieve really. We are meant to just be task managers and go into our shell and, you go into action mode. Okay, somebody died, all right, what are the services gonna be like? Who's gonna pay for it? Who needs to get taken where? You just find enough to fill up your plate so you don't have to really like harp on the actual loss that transpired. My dad was a Marine, so he definitely taught me, like, I think there was a perfect tonic of toxicity in that. So whether you coming from Vietnam as a Marine or the Bronx and Puerto Rican, you both had to be very thick-skinned. So grief and showing emotion wasn't necessarily a lesson in the household. It was more grin and bear it. Yeah, man, don't cry.
Yeah. And I like how you put being in the armed services, you know, having to be tough, as well as, you know, being from the Bronx and having to be tough as well. You know, your environment, I strongly believe, plays a big part in what you learn and how you learn to cope. Because, you know, just based on what you're exposed to.
There's levels of indoctrination. You get indoctrinated from your family, you get indoctrinated from the block that you live on, then you get indoctrinated from the military. And then when you separate, they offer you maybe a week worth of services that you're supposed to fit into your out processing. And they're supposed to be unraveling all of the years of trauma, you know, similar to a kid going to college.
Yeah. Yeah. So with you growing up in the Bronx and having, you know, your dad was a Marine, what coping skills, tools, and techniques that you use to cope with that were healthy and unhealthy?
Um, Honestly, like my dad, you know, he gave me my first beer at 13. Like, first off, the fact that I'm from the Bronx and I had a dad was a win.
Yeah.
So I never took that for granted. But just in that culture, like, and then it was reinforced. Like, I'm not sure if that was from the Caribbean side or from the military side, but you know, you just numb the pain. So all the toxicity came from a lot of excessive drinking, and for a lot of brothers that get out, it converts when they start abusing any medication that they're prescribed. I like to believe that you're only as strong as your discipline allows you to. So every year I fast and I give up all habits that are a vice to me, because if not, I would rely on them. The positive manners, you know, the same as I think most people, you know, we fall into our tribe. So when something happens, whether it be in the military, you know, these are my brothers in arms, I rely on them, or something happens in real life, I rely on my family. And it's if it's shared grief, it all doesn't have to fall on one person's shoulders.
I feel you. I like how you put, you know, you have to learn, you know, from your pain. You learn to numb yourself, and a lot of folks do tend to turn towards like alcohol. And the big point that you brought out was, you know, you're only as strong as your discipline allows you to be. I'm right there with you, man. I every year as well, I take a moment to exercise my own self-discipline too fast. So I'll be like, all right, from, you know, January, well, really from December to April, outside, I'm not drinking.
Sure.
And it's not that I have a problem or anything drinking. I'm just exercising my self-discipline, because I believe that self-discipline equates to self-love.
And as you said, you're exercising it. A lot of people believe that they have total control over their actions and their mind, but if you've never displayed that or exercised that, how can you be sure?
Yeah, correct.
Like, you know, growing up in my environment, we about 14, 15 years old, we were drinking heavily, we were smoking heavily, we were on that time. So the first time I actually had to do that was when I started in the Air Force, when I was going to do like MEPS, and I had to stop smoking for a month. And all my dudes thought that I was crazy. But again, like, if you continue to rely on those other things, like we grew up in the 80s, and at the height of the crack epidemic, in the Bronx. So all I saw was examples of what I didn't want to be. And I realized when you rely on substance, on artificial substance versus the substance of yourself, you're not going to amount to much.
Yeah. Realize what you didn't want to be. And I think having both good and bad examples of what you want to be and what you don't want to be is key. Because a lot of people, they just see bad examples as just, something negative, but they don't take away like the lessons that you can learn from, right, from other people's mistakes. And then to have good examples of what right looks like, it is also helps you, find something to strive for.
It's funny, I have a book coming out entitled "The Son with No Father is a Book with No Author." And as I've been interviewing people on that title, I've come across a lot of brothers that didn't have a father. And that absence of that father really inspired them to be hyper present in their child's life. So it's similar.
I like that. So in talking about, this aspect of behaviors, do you feel like there's a cultural difference in how people cope?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's a cultural difference, but I think it may be a gender difference. I think women have a lot. They're allowed to be emotional, and they have a lot more organized support structures. Whereas men, we surround ourselves with distractions. So when I get up with my boy, it's very rare do we sit down and actually discuss and engage in the vulnerability of what we're going through, losing sleep because of nightmares, always feeling anxious. Instead, we drink and watch a game. We drink and we go to a spot and, unwind, holler at girls, different kind of stupid shit like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I got you. Okay. And so what would you think would be more important? Realizing what you don't want or what you want? Like if you sat down and you looked at what has motivated you the most to be the person you are.
Well, just like, to be honest, I want, like, my gut says, why don't, no, my brain wants to say the example. Because I believe if you see something, you said, I could accomplish it, but that wasn't necessarily my life. I grew up in a lot of doubt. My family didn't think I was going to be much. Different folk, like if you doubted me at some point in my life, I found you as an adult to brag. And I realized that was a deficit within myself that I've been wrestling with for years. So even in regards to my therapy that I go to, those are some of the things that we touch on, because I feel like we're not, it's a sad day when you realize, like, you don't know what it's like to feel unconditional love. It's a sad day, or you don't think you're worthy of it. It's a sad day when you feel like, when you realize the reason why you buy so many sneakers now is to offset the holes that you had growing up. Like, you overcompensate, and that's something that I've done.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So I wanted to say the example, but the absence definitely pushed me.
I got you. And I appreciate, that open and honest, portion.
You know what your man 50 said? He said, I need you to hate so I could use you for your energy. That's very applicable.
Yeah. And, I'm with you. I'm right along the lines of what's motivated me the most has been allowing my anger to fuel my drive and my effort. But using that anger and frustration, instead of having destructive behaviors, to turn those into something positive. You know what I mean?
It's energy, right? It's all energy. So how are you going to convert it?
Correct. So tell us what's been your experience with trauma and grief?
um, as I said, it was funny. Like, I give you a brief synopsis of my introduction to what I did in the Air Force. So obviously, like the joke is it's the chair force. You don't necessarily see combat, all this other shit. So I'm like, fuck it, I'll be the Harvard of the military. You know what I mean? I don't care. You know what I mean? Coming from, very humble beginnings. And it was after 9/11, and we started arming the Predators and the U-2s. So we used to do surveillance in like Qatar and over there. Then after 9/11, we started arming them, and this is way before drones got popular in commercial usage. And I remember this is how long ago this shit was. I was on Black Planet in the office. I'm shorty, right? And my mock calls me. He tells me that there was a message that didn't go out on our secure line. So I go over there, I clear the queue, send the message out. I go over to the shelter where we do the missions. I gave him the thumbs up. He's like, "Do you know what you do?" I was like, "Yeah, I fix computers." He's like, "Nah, sit down." So I watched, long story short, I watched video footage of 5 Marines receive the message and then make moves and obliterate like 30 Taliban. You know what I mean? And then they had to go do the human and start interrogating, and it was very graphic and gory. And it was and so I'm like, I'm bugging out. I'm like, oh, I'm still like 20 years old. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? All this crazy shit, right? And he goes, congratulations, Reyes, you did that. What you talking about? I did that. I ain't do shit. I fixed computers. He goes, no, if you didn't do what you did, those 5 Marines would be the dead ones right now. We have to knock on those doors. But instead, we got 30 bad guys. And it's all because of you. So I'm like, it started. He was like, it's a mechanism, and every gear on the mechanism needs to work optimally for the mechanism to operate.
Yeah.
So, damn, like, you blow my mind and shit, right? And then I remember I had to go pick up my girl from Hampton University. So I'm going to pick her up, and she got in the car, and she started complaining about like science class. And bruh, I spazzed on her, like, you know how fucking real shit is out here. People are dying, goddammit. And she's looking at me like, what is wrong with you? And I think that was like my very first introduction and outburst. You know what I'm saying? And it was kind of immediate when I think about it. And then, the next 6 years I spent doing that, watching that kind of imagery and realizing that, like, yo, war ain't a game. And I had people in garrison and I've made some recommendations to, and that recommendation set off like a domino effect that led to their death. So, you know what I mean? Like, I got guilt behind that, like survivor's remorse. Yeah. And then I lost my sister several years later in the Navy. So, all of these, it ends up being a perfect storm for you to hide from.
Yeah. Man, I feel you. What are some signs that you can share, to let people know that you were dealing with grief and with PTSD? Because, I mean, you hit on survivor's remorse, you hit on the loss of your sister, and, that whole intel portion of how your indirect actions affect things directly.
Yeah, it's that butterfly effect, and that's one of the things about like, as a father now, and watching a son that plays Fortnite incessantly and memorizes all the calibers of guns, etc. Like, it's not a game. It's not a game. When you see somebody's last breath, 30 times a month, it's not a game. Yeah. And for years, I don't got no PTSD. That's for crazy motherfuckers. You know what I mean? Like strong. I don't like nah. I just deal with this shit and like kind of like that that toxicity we were talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until very recently my girl put me on to like her uncle, I guess, and we were just talking about our experiences, and he was telling me, he was like, yo, I think you may really want to holler at somebody, because now when I look in hindsight, I look at my inability to keep a relationship stable. I look at my hyper defensiveness. I look at my anxiousness everywhere I go, and, you know, lines drawn in the sand, and there's nothing you could say to tell me otherwise. And you can't, unless you live in a street life, you can't live according to those rules, because civilized society doesn't they're gonna frown upon you.
Yeah. Yeah. What's been the toughest part of this journey?
Honesty.
Speak on that. I like that. Speak on it.
You know, you go a lot of like men kick the bullshit to themselves every day until they believe they own bullshit. So the longer I deny that there's an issue, the longer that I stay busy enough that I don't have to deal with waking up at night and understanding why I'm shivering, why I broke my knuckle because I woke up in the middle of the night and punched the headboard, why, like, you know, there's why I'm so hard on my kids for no reason, why my son told me for 13 years he's never seen me cry, like just inability to show emotion at certain times. And, you know, you have to be honest with yourself that there's a deficit between being a whole human being and who you are right now. Like I could think of who I was at 18 and who I am at 40 and say, wow, there's a big gap there. But men will rationalize it like, oh, nah, I just grew up. Yeah, but you grew up with experiences that shaped you. And we never want to look at those experiences as something negative, because we feel like that'll remove the valor from our time in service. We feel like that'll remove the value of what we've accomplished. Like, and I think one of the things that me and my therapist talked about was that I accept certain deaths as the price of my success to ensure my children don't have to go that route. And when I said that out loud, I realized how morbid that truly sounded. But again, I'm a man, so I'll rationalize it away.
Yeah. When you say you accept certain deaths, explain that part, because I get what you mean.
I mean, like, 9/11 wasn't my fault, right? And so when we went into Afghanistan, go time. I'm a New Yorker. Y'all said it all, my city. Fuck y'all, right?
Right.
Then the war in Iraq happened, which didn't affect us necessarily directly. Mm-hmm. We were provided, and mind you, we kind of knew the intelligence was bullshit that Cheney was kicking.
Yeah.
But after that part happened, our budget went through the roof, and I got certified in 3 different operating systems. I got certified in storage administration. I got certified. They knew that we couldn't have dummies operating our multi-billion-dollar systems. Mm-hmm. So I went from a kid that graduated high school with a 1.8 GPA, that had no confidence, that didn't know how to study, to now at 24 years old, getting out the military, making 6 figures. That was a 6-year turnaround. And of those 6 years, 4.5 of them, we were at war. So if supporting that war, regardless if I believed in it politically or morally, if that was the price I had to pay, now, mind you, saying that that's just my belief. That's not all the shit that actually happened during the war.
Yeah.
Not all the friends that I made with my Marine brothers that died, and my Army brothers that died, my sister that died. You know what I mean? Like my man that I told to go take the MREs to the line because like fuck it, we from the Bronx and we stronger than these niggas that died. But I'm able to be a provider for a lot more than just my household. So if that's the cost, it's already happened. So I'll eat that. Yeah. Do I want that for my kids? Hell no.
I feel you, and that's deep, man. And much respect, and definitely a shout out to all the soldiers and Marines and airmen and Navy men out there that sacrifice their youth, you know what I mean, to ensure that people are here to, you know, to live free. And
that's a good way to put it. Sacrificing their youth. And essentially what I didn't know I was sacrificing, I thought it was just time. I didn't equate time to youth. I didn't equate time to innocence. And the cost of innocence lost, we're still wrestling with it years later. I can imagine like dudes that make this shit a full career. Like you really have to either drink the Kool-Aid or be able to compartmentalize your morality.
Yeah. Speak on what you're doing now. So you said, you know, all of this sacrifice, which you had to endure in order to become a better person now. So what are you doing with yourself now?
Well, when I got to Atlanta 5 years ago, I've been writing since I was 15 years old. So I've been essentially writing for 25 years. I never really shared until the last 5 years when I got to Atlanta. And the reason why I started sharing was I was finally able to match the lessons with my experiences so it didn't sound whiny to me now. It felt more wise than anything else. And I was able to express the plight of a lot of brothers, whether it be from a military perspective, from a street perspective, from a divorce perspective, as a man and a father. I felt like those were good examples to promote. So like even with my book that I mentioned earlier, we're establishing fatherhood workshops, father-son healing workshops. So that way we encourage dialogue between father and son, child and parent, so that way they can effectively be human to each other and not just a title. And I think that was one of the things that I got caught up in. You're my dad, or you're my commander, not realizing your name is Mario and your name is Todd, or whatever the fuck it was. You know what I'm saying? Like, I want to be able to humanize the experience of both man and father, because those aren't necessarily indicative. I think one is indicative of the other, but you don't have to be a father to be a man. And just by speaking a lot about mental health issues, I have tons of poetry that speaks to loss and different things that I've gone through and ways that I've took accountability for my own actions.
Mm-hmm.
So, say what?
Has your writing helped you deal with?
Oh, hands down. Like if it wasn't for writing, I would have blew up a long time ago. Like I probably wouldn't be here, honestly. Like even when I don't, if I just take a brief hiatus from writing a week, my energy is off and I'm I'm arguing. I'm very aggressive for no reason. You know what I mean? But I'll find the reason to be aggressive.
I got you. So let me ask you this. Of course, when people are hurting or going through and still trying to process, their trauma and grief, you tend to hurt people along the way. Have you hurt people along your journey, and how did you make amends with them?
I've hurt a lot of people on my journey. I think I'm still hurting people in my journey, to be honest. How do you make amends? The best apology is change behavior. So I try to adjust my behavior. I try to recognize that life isn't a war. But as a Black and brown man in America, it kind of feels like that. So just in certain things, sometimes you hurt people simply by not caring. You know what I'm saying? Like, I had a moment in which, we had a miscarriage, my ex-wife and I. And it was just a Tuesday to me. I didn't really think about it. You know what I mean? She wasn't that far along, so to me, it wasn't real. However, the seed of that resentment for me not caring about her feelings and the attachment she already created, set in motion the avalanche that became of a divorce. Feel me?
Yeah.
So, we hurt people. Sometimes, like, shit, when I was younger in Baltimore, I just go out and pick a fight. You know what I mean? Luckily, we both went home relatively unhurt. It was just a fight. It's not like we were shooting and stabbing each other, but I know people that shit could have ended really bad, especially in Baltimore. So I think sometimes I'm still hurting my children with my hypervigilance and my high expectations, not putting in a perspective that I raised them so that they didn't have to see reality the way I did. So what's real to them ain't real to me. But every time they start complaining about some shit, I'm holding them to my standard and not theirs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think that's it's an honest reflection.
No, and like you said, your reality versus theirs, and how they're growing up now and what you grew up in is different. So the fact that you have that mind frame to step out of your own perspective and see it from theirs is big. And you hit the nail on the head when you talked about, like, the biggest way to make amends is to show change behavior.
What I'm just doing is say I'm sorry and then keep up the bullshit, like it, and if you and consciously do it, you know what I mean? Like, sometimes everybody falls off the wagon. If I'm saying I'm not going to drink and I drink, my bad, like. But to get to the root of why you did it is what's important. You feel me? Mm-hmm. I know we was talking earlier, like, about how poetry has helped, and my therapist asked me to write something for our session. So I'm gonna read that for you real quick, all right?
Okay, yeah. Look out.
Hey, yo, what up?
No, I was gonna ask you to read something, so you
I think this is very applicable. Hey, yo, they tell you to buy property when you see blood on the street, but fail to acknowledge the psychology when you start to see the blood run in your dreams. Nightmares of blood cover your inseam, grinding your teeth so hard it wakes you out of your sleep. The anxiousness makes the hair stand up on your neck, and you take short breaths to level your peace. I prefer to be alone, not haunted by the memories of things I have seen. They call it PTSD. I call that PC because I tried to make a home in my heart, but I found that shit empty. I call it my duty, so I follow their lead. Past the insult to niggas, past the obvious white privilege, right into running rivers of night shivers, numb to rumming like liquor. Xanax had me constipated for 3 days straight. Blood in my urine, alcohol has waged war on my liver. My coping mechanisms doped up on medicines, hoping to suppress my adrenaline. I appreciate the support, but there's no remorse for a veteran. Only judgment from outside critics. Only judgment from inside my spirit. Service before self until your mental health pivots, holding my pistol like I used to hold my rosary beads. Seeking salvation, but every time I pray, I have to contain another nosebleed. Ears ringing from another prayer made in vain. So I punish my body and work out through the injury just to maintain that pain. It's not as cool as the commercial. You see, I subscribe to their virtues. Now my war is personal. I never meant to hurt you, but I became the monster I never thought that I would turn into. The greatest wars are not fought on land. They're found in man, because the internal war is eternal.
That's dope, bro. That's dope. Man, you hit one point in there that really resonated when you spoke about holding the pistol the same as holding the rosary bead.
Mm-hmm.
And I could see that image, you know, in itself, and having that internal battle that every man has to deal with. That's deep. That's deep. Really
I remember, you know, Spanish kid raised Catholic, obvious. And I remember, like, in that moment, in those moments of despair, you would clutch that rosary bead and be sending them prayers up, right? Like that shit was like Lionel's fucking sword. You know, you're sending the prayers straight up as an antenna. And then as you grow up and you go through shit, you let go, you loosen your grip on that rosary bead, and now you praying with this. And you don't even know who you're praying for. You don't know if you're praying for the trespassers that you don't want to give allowance to, or if you're praying for yourself because you know you could do it.
Yeah. Yeah. So what kept you wanted to keep going when you wanted to give up?
My niece, kids in the family. You know, my mom's always told me, you know, don't be the coward. The coward's way out ain't it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When you have purpose, like I have purpose outside of myself, and I know I'm gonna be very confused when they eventually grow up and leave, because then I'm gonna have to find my purpose again. You know, if you don't have purpose for yourself, the fucking military will give you this.
Mm-hmm. I got you. And so having your family is what kept you going. Was there anything that caused you to correct any of your destructive behaviors?
Morality, like I have a good moral baseline. Like my family got a credo family first. Like I got a very, very big family. Like we island for real, like 17. My mother got 17 brothers and sisters. So my cousin game is immaculate. So even like, let's say when I lost my sister, and that was probably the hardest loss I've ever taken, we all came together. So it wasn't so much how I found my purpose. It was more of they wouldn't let me let go.
You know, bet you can appreciate them much more for them.
Nah, come on now. Like, and then, you know, and it's crazy because now years later, and you come to some level of reconciliation, you appreciate and you try to then be that for someone else. Matter of fact, I took my son to Chattanooga last week just to get like some alone time with son. We throwing the football around and some kid came out, you know, maybe like 25, you know, tattoos all over. He was a hood kid, but he was just, and, you know, it's COVID still. So I'm like, nigga, don't get too close. So he wanted to poly and throw some footballs around. So I did it with him, exchanged social media information. And he hit me 2 days ago telling me he tried to commit suicide, but a cop saved his life. So I don't know what took him to that level, but I know now he got an ear that he, from an OG that he could borrow.
Yeah.
I'm plugged in, so I was able to give him some resources.
Man, I appreciate you. You didn't have to connect with him out there, and just the fact that you did, and that whole mantra of moving or paying it forward, right? What was given to you to pay it forward.
You touched on it earlier, though. You said your indirect action has ultimate consequences. So I didn't know that show of kindness would be him reaching out that could potentially save his life. It's that butterfly effect again. That one mechanism, that one gear affects the greater mechanism.
Yeah. So you spoke on going to someone and talking to them about, you know, seeking professional help. To describe your experience with your counselor.
Honestly, my counselors, I can't speak for everybody on their staff, but my dude Black, and you know, there's a lot of shit going on that's setting off a lot of triggers in me, you know, just in the country in general. And he's able to give the right advice. Like, he's able to relate. I don't feel like I'm talking to a therapist as much as I'm talking to an OG. You know what I mean? A brother wise. Like, I'm looking for methods of reconciliation and conflict resolution, even with Chanel, just to make sure that I don't burn the bridges that I helped build. You know what I mean? These are important techniques. So my experience has been really good. In the beginning, I didn't want to do that shit. So I was like, nah, you tell me. You know what I mean? Like, I would like even play games where I was like, you know what? I'm gonna take him on my ride. I'm gonna ask him mad questions just to play devil's advocate and play around. And I realized shit, that in itself is destructive behavior because he's there to help me. And here I am wasting our hour and a half session.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like how you put that. With your counselor, so part of what I'm putting out there is about cultural sensitive therapy. If your counselor looks like you or have been through some of the similar or same experiences you've been through, then the connection will be deeper, which will help make the treatment more satisfying.
I'm like, there's cultural disconnects even in the way that we communicate. So if I had an older white counselor and I'm in my zone and I'm like, nah, this nigga did blah, 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 he's gonna be like, hey, now, can we not use that language? Because now you're offended, or you don't like, it's gonna be, you're gonna start walking in those murky waters that at that juncture is gonna make me feel like, yo, I don't really feel comfortable even opening up to this cat. Because he might be an all lives matter motherfucker. And once we start having that dialogue, you're gonna automatically put yourself, now you're one of my enemies too.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's just what it is. Like I said, like I'm really good for drawing that line in the sand.
What advice would you give your younger self?
Get ready. Yeah, right. Nah, I would say two things. One, amortization isn't magic. Believe in compound interest the way you believe in all the other bullshit. So that way you don't have to be working for somebody your whole life. And the sooner you take accountability for your actions, I would say understand the difference between accountability and responsibility. Just because you ain't the cause doesn't mean you're not accountable for how you respond to something. And the sooner you understand that, the more trials and pain you could save yourself, especially in the military.
Yeah. I like that, man. I like that. Have you seen your growth? Like looking back, do you see your growth?
I do. I see a lot of growth. I see tons of growth. The people around me see it clearer because I still look at myself in a deficit and believe I have so much further to go.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, let's touch on your book now. I want to know more about it. This title is more than catchy. It got some realness to it.
But let me ask you now. What does that title say to you? A Son with No Father is a book with no author.
It's kind of one of those things. So it's, you remember hearing, right, the question, if a tree falls in a forest and no one is around, does it still make a sound?
Sure.
Right? Yes. And so when I hear the title of that book, A Son with No Father is like a book with no author. That book, that son is still going to have a life. That book is still going to be written even if no one is around. And how that book is written, how that son raises himself or goes through life, you know, it's like the Wild Wild West.
Yeah.
Because you don't know. You're subject to how you're conditioned in your environment.
Yeah. Like that was a very good analogy. Like, you know, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody's around to hear it, is there evidence the tree fell? Yes. Was anybody able to witness it? No. So the book itself, it grew. It started off as a punchline in a poem. Then I was like, nah, that needed to breathe a little bit more. So I took the step back and I wrote the poem. And the poem was powerful. And I kind of, I remember when I became a single father, how I started overly sharing my journey to offset the stereotypes of a single dad. And in doing so, a lot of brothers started hitting me up, thanking me. I'm talking about brothers that I knew from every part of my life, thanking me for showing them the example that they never had. And in that, in me sharing, they got inspired to resolve certain things that they was going on in their life with their own kids. So I decided from that point to actually write the book. And I didn't know the first thing about writing a book. I just knew how to write poems. So I needed a structure, and one of the books that helped me not get kicked out the Air Force after a very tumultuous 6 years was 48 Laws of Power. And if you remember that book, he had the law, the reversal of the law, and then how to protect yourself from the law. So what I did was I gave the dialogue, I picked 8 sensitive subjects that imposed themselves onto me and my son's life. And I gave them the dialogue between my son and I as I remember it, follow with the lesson I was hoping to impart, and I leave it with the poem it inspired. And in that, I was able to find like concise value. And the reason why I asked older brothers about how they interpret that title is because I never wanted to come across disrespectful. I'm not saying if you didn't have, listen, if you didn't have a father, you are, shit, if you were Christian, Jesus didn't have a father either. Not one of man. And if your father chose not to be there, he's not a man either, which means that shit was divine. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like you are the immaculate conception. You created yourself. And whether the author is known or not, it's still a masterpiece. A masterpiece is a masterpiece. You don't got to put Mark Twain's name on Huckleberry Finn, if you or what's her name, Toni Morrison on The Bluest Eye for that shit to be a masterpiece. It's a masterpiece regardless. However, you remove that author, and you're essentially moving the table of contents. Now, it's very hard to read a book, especially a book that's a resource, without a table of contents. So you have no preface to know what's coming up. And if you're a father, your entire job is to prepare your child for what's coming. That's why I felt like the lessons part was so necessary. That's why even the poetry was necessary, because I may reflect in the lesson and be like, damn, I fucked up. I couldn't handle that better. But in the poem, you could kind of see my idealism. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So yeah, it started off 30 pages, then it grew to 60 pages, then it grew to 112, then it grew to 160. And I was like, I'm gonna stop, because I'm gonna just keep writing this forever, because as he grows up, he's going to keep going through situations that I'm gonna wanna start putting more in the book. And sometimes my understanding of it changes. So now I wanna adjust things in the book, when a book, just like a poem, is really just a snapshot of how you felt at that moment. If they wanna get the evolution, they gotta come on a journey with me.
And so where can we find this book?
You go to my website. Right now, it's only through my website at www.poppypicassopoetry.com. And that's Poppy, P-A-P-I, because I'm Puerto Rican, not P-O-P-P-Y. I don't do drugs. And I hope everybody knows how to spell Picasso.
I got you. I'll make sure we put that in the description, man.
I appreciate that.
Definitely got you. And so we find the book through your website. That's also how people can get in touch with you. What about?
You could go to my website and inbox me, or if you social media, just I am Poppy Picasso on IG, or Poppy Picasso Poetry on Facebook. And I'm constantly updating and posting material, whether it be poetry related, whether it be socially activism, whether it be just the journey of my fatherhood. You know what I mean? And when I start doing I'm gonna reach out to you when I start doing the mental health workshops too, because I feel like you will be a very good advocate to speak as well.
I appreciate it. And how can we find you to come listen to some of your work there in Atlanta?
I'll add me on social media. I post it all. You don't know exactly when and where. Right now it's fucked up because of COVID, but yeah. You know what I mean? Hopefully around mid-July, late July, I should start feeling more comfortable stepping into that arena.
Got you.
Okay. Yeah, COVID fucked the game up, bro. My book rollout was supposed to be fire, but now it's all virtual, and I'm like, okay, I'll do what I can here for now.
Indeed. All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up. Any last words of wisdom or encouragement you want to share?
Your journey ain't over until it's not you that determines when your journey is over. You know, I believe there's always a way to adjust in the event that you find yourself in a dark place. I encourage you to find all the resources that Greg provides you. I hope people was able to find some value and some merit in the words that I shared. I'm always open for a good debate or just exchange further philosophy. So in the event that anybody needs to, you'll never hit me in need, and I won't be there to help. I don't care if it's a stranger or not. I give the same level of respect to my commanders, my generals, Fortune 500 company presidents that I do to a homeless man on the streets. Understand? My mother told me like this: never give anybody money, but never deny anybody food. And I look at that as, even if it's food for thought, I'll be there for you.
All right.
All right, my brother.
Everyone, this is Greg and Poppy Picasso signing out with guards down, telling all y'all out there to stay safe, stay focused, and stay engaged.